Should everybody know if you own a gun? And will you get your pension? Those questions and more next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state government, sometimes the federal government, and how it just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenberg from the State Journal-Register. A lot going on in government these days as the legislators are back in session, and maybe not as crazy as Washington, but Springfield's got plenty going on. To discuss it with me, a couple of experts and observers. Kent Redfield is back, Professor Emeritus of Political Science, University of Illinois Springfield, and an expert in many fields, particularly campaign finance. Kent, welcome.
Great to be here.
Scott Reeder, Managing Editor, Illinois State House News, which provides, audio, video, and words to media all over Illinois, and he works with some other states too. We might talk about Wisconsin. Scott, welcome back.
Great to be here, Bernie.
Guns, not a topic we've discussed too often lately on this show that I recall. On the other hand, Illinois, over the years that I've been watching Springfield, has become one of just two states that doesn't allow concealed carry of weapons for qualified individuals. But big controversy broke this week when Attorney General Lisa Madigan said that she thought that, I guess it was a request from the Associated Press, to make public the names of people who have firearm owners' ID cards. And she said that should be public. And many gun owners and many legislators said that shouldn't be public. What's going on here, and who's going to win this one, and why is it important?
I think you're seeing. I think Lisa Madigan has a terrific record on public records and public access. I think that she came down on the that side. I think that there are a lot of people in the legislature who have historically been gun control advocates or anti-gun, who probably don't want it to be known that they also are gun owners.
You think it's the legislators themselves?
I think there's legislators out there. I know there are legislators out there who are gun owners, some that even carry firearms when they're in Springfield.
They're not supposed to do that, are they?
No, they aren't. But I always find it interesting that some people there might be a bit of hypocrisy in that building. Can you imagine that?
Well, I'm interested because, obviously I heard, as others did, legislators talking about this. Kirk Dillard, state senator from Hinsdale, certainly talking about if you put out a list of who owns a gun, that kind of makes the houses of those who don't a target, or the houses of those who have guns a target if some criminal wants to watch when they leave and they can see what house to go into because they know there might be guns in there that they can steal and resell. I don't know. Kent, what do you... Go ahead.
Using that logic, I guess if you looked at who has driver's licenses, you could help the car thieves.
So you think this should be public?
Yes, very much so. I'm all for public access and public records, and I see nothing at all wrong with this being public record. And I am a gun owner.
Well,
Are you?
Yes.
Are you a hunter too?
I'd like to get out hunting more. Let's put it that way.
Okay, you're a busy dad. Okay, Kent.
Yeah. And the impetus for this is the Associated Press wanted to do a story. They wanted to do research to see whether or not, how well is the law being administered. So if it's a question about you have to meet certain qualifications to get a firearms owner's ID card.
Like not being a felon, for example?
Yeah, then you can see who's got the card and run that against other databases and see whether or not the law is being administered well or not. That's a perfectly, we should be, we want to know whether public policy programs are being administered correctly, but you jump right in the middle of a debate that involves privacy, and immediately we have the issues about if people know you have a gun, you're at risk. If people know you don't have a gun, you're at risk. We get First Amendment and Second Amendment things thrown together. And this is not everybody, Lisa Madigan, is impossible the Attorney General can't win on this. And if she says, well, the latest wrinkle is, we're just going to release the names. Well, if you have the names, then you can't do the research. And so it just, it gives everybody that wants to ride a particular hobby horse having to do with, either privacy or Second Amendment, then away we go. And it's really kind of a lead up to what's going to be a much more focused, serious conversation about concealed carry, and that's going to come. But I suspect the legislature, for a bunch of reasons, both the strength of the gun owners and their organizations, and perhaps the reasons that Scott's alluding to, they'll probably pass something exempting them. I don't think the AP is going to get access to it, but it's a run up to to what is probably going to be the bigger decision this
Yes, Scott.
this
And also-
session.
I'm sorry.
No.
It's easy to, there's a lot of legitimate reasons why those records ought to be public. I'll give you an example. 4 or 5 years ago, there was a person who was a convicted felon who ended up on one of the DNR's favors list for getting a hunting or a deer permit from
Department of Natural Resources.
expedited. And I was kind of scratching my head at the time, like, how is a felon able to hunt because you can't have a FOID? You aren't supposed to have a FOID card if you're a felon. And I went and the thought crossed my mind that perhaps this person who has a particular amount of political clout had gotten a favor from the administration. Mm-hmm. But then you don't have
a previous administration, of course, at that time.
Administration.
No favors anymore. We know
yes.
that. Yes.
But there was no way to confirm that he had a FOID card, although we knew he had gotten favors to get a hunting license.
Oh, because you could not even you couldn't ask for that. That's very interesting. I do find guns in general over all of these years to be one of the most regionalized things, because Illinois has really been a leader in the gun control arena in Chicago, where just until the U.S. Supreme Court overturned it, you couldn't even own a gun if you lived in the city of Chicago, not even in your house unless you were grandfathered in and you owned it before they changed the law up there. Now the Supreme Court of the United States says you can own a gun, but downstate has been a big hunting area, big Second Amendment rights area, and that has held sway. And yet, look, we're now one of only 2 states without concealed carry. So I don't know what difference new mayor of Chicago-elect Rahm Emanuel will make. Mayor Daley has been strongly for gun control, has been very consistent in that the entire time he's been in, over 20 years, that we need more laws to keep guns out of the hands of folks so that you can at least charge the criminals when they have them illegally. Of course, gun rights folks say the criminals don't get a FOID card, they just buy the guns hot, and then they're at law-abiding citizens are at a disadvantage. So it's just one of those perennial issues that I guess if you look at trends, Illinois will probably be a concealed carry state because the rest of the country is, but who knows? And there we are.
Yeah, I suspect that this is probably the year. I think that John Collerton talking about the possibility of looking at the issue, who's been an adamant opponent and actually featured the issue when he ran for Congress at one time.
That he was a gun control person. Right.
And what makes it complicated in Illinois is because of our very strong home rule provisions that allow municipalities to essentially pass ordinances that are different from state law in order to lower the drinking age, raise the drinking age. We had to get a 3/5 majority in the House and the Senate to pass that bill, or the localities, the Champaign-Urbana would have just lowered the drinking age back down.
Which was pretty nice when some of us were in college, but let's not talk about it.
So if we're going to have a statewide, a uniform concealed carry law, you've got to have a supermajority.
Which is going to be hard to get with Republican votes.
A lot of Democrats, or particularly in
downstate,
Democrats.
Right. That's true.
And so it's going to be interesting to see whether it's kind of, we have a high noon, can you get 70 or can't you get 70, or do we in fact get some kind of, statewide, or maybe it's an opt-out for Cook County. It will be an interesting dance.
I may have reversed my parties there, but it is interesting. The Democratic Senate President John Collerton, who you mentioned, who's been so pro-gun control over all these years, has also been a great advocate of helmets for motorcycle riders as a mandatory thing. If that ever passes, then we'll know the world is upside down in Illinois, because we know the motorcycle lobby is very strong as well, because they don't want the restriction to say you have to wear a helmet.
And ironically, the gun guys and the motorcycle guys have the same lobbyist.
Isn't that interesting? Okay. Let's move on. Pensions. Speaking of President Cullerton, his lawyer has put out an extensive report saying that, hitting on an issue that is of great interest to state employees, of course, in and around Springfield, but other people as well, saying that if you are a current state employee, that they believe that your pension benefits as granted from the day you started work cannot be altered under our Constitution. And I know that President Cullerton, talking to our State Journal Register's editorial board, had said, part of that was even the discussion that was held, the debate that was held at the Constitutional Convention for the 1970 Constitution, that, this means if you have pension benefits, that cannot be changed. Speaker Madigan of the Illinois House, another Democrat, recently said they might want to look at seeing if current employees from this day forward could have different benefits, even though the benefits accrued already for their service up to this time could be would have to be maintained. So that's a different way of looking at things. All of it is in the face of a giant continuing budget problem despite the tax increase the legislature passed. So are we at an impasse now in all of this? What happens to pensions? Should state employees working now be worried that what they are planning for as their pension will be changed?
I don't know that we're going to do it statutorily and test the courts. I mean, ultimately, we don't resolve that question without a Illinois Supreme Court decision. The opinion also alluded to the fact that these contractual relationships, insofar as collective bargaining, could be altered, and that since the state is perhaps 95% of the people that work for state government are in unions. But I mean, you would have a small percentage of people that wouldn't be covered by a collective bargaining agreement. So government, there's still leverage, and we still need to solve the pension crisis. I'm not sure that a two-tiered or three-tiered system for people currently in it is going to happen if the Senate president, is adamant about it. So that doesn't mean that there won't be changes. We're certainly going to go after health care for retirees.
In other words, many don't pay anything at this point,
right?
And they might be asked to kick in.
That's a state law. That's a statutory thing. That's an add-on after was not part of any kind of pension rules when people joined the system. So yeah, it means it's going to be more. It's going to probably take something off the table, but we still have to address the problem. We're going to go broke.
Yeah. Now, President Cullerton, as I have heard him say, he has believed all along that it's unconstitutional to change basic pension benefits, like the wages you get for current employees. But he said if the House passed something that they would consider it. Scott, where do you think it's going?
I just don't. I mean, it looks pretty clear when you read the state constitution. You look at the con debates from 1970, or I guess 1969, that their intent was to preserve pension benefits. And the research I've done on this over the years, it's not just a state constitution issue. It's also a federal law issue, and the fact that they've created a dependence. People are depending on this promise, and it's pretty hard to break that. Even beyond that, from a matter of public policy, is it something we really want to do? I mean, or have the ability to do as a state to politically to get it through? I mean, I just don't think that there's too many people eager out there to reduce the pensions of school teachers and state workers. I think that.
You hear some people talking about the need to do that just because of the.
Well, I'm not talking about. I think everybody agrees there's a need to reform that system, and I think many people agree that there's a need to reduce the costs over time, especially taking care of new hires. But it seems pretty clear that the people who are already in system have a legal protection there.
Yeah, interesting, and it should be noted that the legislature last year passed quickly and unexpectedly at the time a whole reform of pension benefits for new hires, which began January 1st this year, which is why a lot of people got named to judgeships late in 2010, because their benefits are a whole lot better than anybody named after January 1st, and not just judges, but all kinds of public employees in Illinois under that law, which the Quinn administration, with logic behind them, says we'll save billions and billions over the years. So we'll see where that goes. On the issue of public employees, I found, and others know as well perhaps, something interesting, but Wisconsin is now going through these convulsions about their governor, Scott Walker, I think, wanting to pass a bill to limit collective bargaining rights for state workers. The 14 Democrats in the Senate have not given him the opportunity to get a vote through the Senate because they've come to Illinois. One of them is named Kathleen, I hope I pronounced her name right, Wilhoit? Vinehart, yes, thank you. Anyway, and she is the wife of Doug Kane, who is a former state representative from Springfield. And I did get to speak with her from somewhere in northern Illinois by telephone. And she said, it's inconvenient, but not as inconvenient as all those people who have fought for union rights over these years, and we're going to do it as long as we think it's necessary. Interesting and difficult situation, but Scott, you have a perspective because part of your job with, is it the Franklin Center?
The Franklin Center.
Is also overseeing the Wisconsin Bureau. So any thoughts on where that's going, just a little bit, and if you think Illinois is going to be impacted by this kind of craziness that Wisconsin has seen?
I don't see it happening this year in Illinois. I mean, although it's worth noting, the financial situation Illinois is in is far, far, far worse than Wisconsin.
Just a number of billions.
In numbers
down.
of billions,
they're in
proportion of
threesome.
the budgets. Yeah, I mean, everything along those lines. I think Wisconsin, what we're seeing it happen in Madison right now, I think is the harbinger of what we're going to be seeing in state capitals all around the country over the next 3 or 4 years. We are really entering an era of a benefit/budget crisis at our state level, and something's going to have to give.
Okay, Kent, the fact that Illinois has a Democratic governor now for the next, almost 4 full years,
Right.
and a Democratic legislature still, does that mean Illinois will not see the kind of battle we're seeing in Wisconsin, of course?
I don't think you're going to have, in terms of collective bargaining rights, organizing, those sorts of things, I don't think you're going to see a change in terms of those. Now, you are going to have a new mayor in Chicago who has to negotiate a collective bargaining agreement with the Chicago Teachers Union. We're going to get some sense of that about whether you could have some play at the legislature. I mean, people forget that in 1995, 96, the legislature took away the right of the Chicago school teachers to strike when the Republicans controlled all of state government. It's going to be a fascinating contrast because Illinois raised taxes. They probably will not restrict collective bargaining. They're going to try to deal with their fiscal crisis. Wisconsin tracked in the other direction, and you're going to have massive cuts to local government and school districts in Wisconsin. We're probably not going to do that in Illinois. At this point, we're not, they get a portion of the income tax. We're talking about taking that away from them. So in terms of, Illinois is going to have a very different model than what we're seeing in Indiana, in Ohio, in Wisconsin. And so there's if you like the United States, individual states as laboratories of democracy, well, we're going to see, we've got some interesting experiments
Different
going
test tubes going on.
And so no, I think Illinois, if in fact we get our fiscal house in order, there will be less pressure 4 years from now to try to do things with collective bargaining. If we manage to run the train off the track again, then collective bargaining is probably going to be on the table 4 years from now.
Interesting. You mentioned school districts. School consolidation continues to be discussed this year. The Governor Pat Quinn said it in his State of the State / budget address that he wants, when we have more than 800 school districts in Illinois, perhaps near the most in the country, if not the most, and he's talking about consolidation. But as Senator Larry Bomke from Springfield said to me, the most difficult animal to kill is a school mascot. Which it must be somebody, it must be a long time line because it's such a good one. But what's going to happen with school consolidation? Do we think that the legislature will force that hand, considering the loyalty people have to their smaller districts? On the other hand, we used to have more than 1,000 districts, or more than 1,100 that I recall. So things have moved in that direction over the years.
I think that it's got two things going against it and one big thing going for it. The two things it's got going against it are you don't reap immediate financial benefits to consolidation on a state level. I mean, in other words, the state doesn't start saving money right away. So it'll be years
Right.
down the road. And two, and as we know, lawmakers are most concerned with right now, not 5-10 years.
If you want to
down the road.
generalize.
Yes, but and also the political backlash lawmakers, particularly from rural and some suburban areas, are likely to face if they try to force consolidation. That said, it's really an insane system we have here in Illinois, where we have that many school districts, and a lot of kids, particularly in very rural areas, are very much underserved with college preparatory classes and whatnot.
They just don't have enough
offered.
staff and
Yeah.
yeah. Kent, any thoughts
Yeah.
on if this? I mean, you've watched this process for a long time.
It is incredibly tough for all the reasons that Scott talked about. It is not, if we don't take advantage of technology, which we should, we're going to continue to have these problems. There are administrative costs on top of it. I mean, you could do things to cut down on administrative layers that would have some savings.
Yeah, well, a lot of what they talk about is just seeing superintendent salaries, which get trotted out now and then, drives people crazy, especially in the suburbs, but some downstate too.
And so we should be saving money, but what should be driving this is what Scott is talking about, which is ultimately what are services you're providing for kids, and it's not just about the dollars. I mean, sure, if you save money, you got more money left to give to kids, but we need new models. I mean, there are some school districts that are too big, and bureaucracy keeps you from doing things you need. Other school districts
That sounds like
are way
Chicago.
too small.
Yeah,
And
but they're not going to
sometimes-
break up the Chicago school district, are they?
well, but we did some interesting things with local control when we did school reform before. The problem is people get so invested in the current institutions and the current models that those become much more important than the bottom line, which is providing education for kids. And so, we have to take advantage. Universities are now into online classes and distance learnings in ways that increase the capacity to serve students, but also help the bottom line of the university. And the state should be involved with those sorts of things. But that takes people out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, and now Chicago school reform, when the Republicans briefly controlled the Illinois legislature for a couple of years in the 90s, and the Speaker of the House those 2 years was Lee Daniels. Lee Daniels came back to the State House this last week to see a portrait of himself, not done by sitting with the painter, but done off of a photograph, unveiled at the State House, and he lamented some of the deep cuts that Governor Quinn has been talking about in social services, but also said that he understands that the budget problem is probably a lot worse than when he was Speaker. Any thoughts on, it's interesting, you have a Republican decrying, who was in command of his half of the legislature back in the 90s, decrying cuts being made by a Democratic governor.
Well, I think Speaker Daniels always was very interested in that area of public policy. He had a family connection that he still has, but it's about deciding what are the essential services and then how are we going to pay for
Right,
them.
and of course we're talking about he has a
Yes.
child with a disability, so he's always been very interested in that issue.
Now we're in a situation where we've so badly managed our budget that there are no good answers, and we don't seem to be having. We seem to just make big slashes one way or another, rather than having a conversation about what's essential and what isn't.
Yeah, of course, Governor Quinn does seem to react to when people shout loud. Sometimes there's reversals.
But the governor tends to, it's whoever seems to have his ear last, which was always the complaint about George Ryan, is that it was whoever got to him last was the one that prevailed. And so whether or not, you'd like a coherent plan, and you'd also like strong leadership in terms of pushing it through. And whether we see that on consolidation or on budgets, I think that the jury's still out on the governor in terms of being a leader. I think that's clear.
Yeah, you know, we did not rehearse this, but George Ryan was also in the news this week because something came out he was interviewed in prison for a court case, and he basically said he was right to release everybody from death row before he ended his term as governor, even when he was under a cloud of indictment, which has now ended him in federal prison because of the licenses for bribe scandal.
No,
But
he wasn't indicted when he did the
okay, he was under the investigation.
under
He wasn't
investigation.
indicted.
Yes.
Thank you for my timeline update, truly. But interestingly, as we tape the show, Pat Quinn, the current governor, now has before him a bill that would end the death penalty in Illinois. And I guess we think because he's scheduled an event at Northwestern University that it's likely that he will be abolishing the death penalty in Illinois. Scott, is that what you think? And what would be the reasoning there for the governor to take that action?
Well, I think there's maybe a 1 in 20 chance that he won't sign it, but I think that, you know, obviously it was a group of Northwestern students that years ago got this discussion going when they discovered a wrongly convicted man on death row.
Yeah, they found somebody else who went on tape to say he did it.
Yes, and so when the governor scheduling a bill signing out at the or what we assume is a bill signing out at Northwestern, I think it's a pretty good bet that that's probably what's going to happen. I think it's going to be very interesting because part of the challenge, as Kent alluded to, is consistency in message. Because Pat Quinn ran on a platform of being for the death penalty, and now he's signing a bill to abolish it.
Okay, well, we are just about out of time. But interestingly, and our Attorney General had also said that she thinks it should be maintained, the death penalty, in certain heinous cases. So, tough decision. We'll see how that goes, and we'll probably talk about it again. As for now, I'd like to thank Kent Redfield, Scott Reeder for being with me on the show. I'm Bernie Schoenberg. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.